Hello and welcome to Let's Squawk About It. Today our guest is an assistant professor at Florida A&M University. Ayodeji, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your area of expertise?
Thanks for having me, Sam. My name is Ayodeji Aderibigbe. I'm an assistant professor of animal science at Florida A&M University. My area generally is monogastric nutrition. So I do a lot of nutritional work with poultry and swine. I have my PhD in animal science at Purdue University. And so in Florida A&M University, I've been doing a lot of research looking into how production system affects birds' response, the conventional versus the alternative designs, and so on and so forth. And now we can improve and optimize both styles, in order to meet food security challenges.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, we've welcomed you here today to discuss exogenous additives in poultry nutrition. So let's start by addressing what these additives are and why they're important.
I've done a lot of work with exogenous additives over the last decade as a nutritionist, and I'd say exogenous additives are just, supplements or non-nutritive compounds that are added to poultry diets, okay, in order to improve their production performance, their gut health, their welfare, whatever metric you're trying to look at. And so they're important because, sometimes you have a situation whereby the efficiency, for example, if you're adding a feed enhancer, the efficiency of that nutrient in terms of how the birds can handle it is not as much as we want. And so you're adding something extra in order to improve that digestive efficiency. And sometimes you can also look at it from the health perspective, and you're trying to add something to help to improve the gut health of the animal. So we are just trying to optimize, the welfare, the nutritional input and output of the animal, and that's why it's very important in our poultry production enterprise.
Right. And what are some just quick examples of some of these exogenous additives?
So you can have, the easy ones is the enzymes, exogenous
Mhm.
enzymes like uh, proteases, like phytases, which is a big one, amylase, carbohydrates mixtures. You can also have prebiotics, probiotics. You can have, some, mycotoxin binders. There are a lot of them. There's a whole lot of them that you can actually add for specific reasons, okay,
Mhm.
into the animal nutrition.
Yeah. And you did touch on some of the advantages, but what are a few more advantages and maybe even some disadvantages of using these additives?
So like I said, the major advantage, at least from the producer perspective, one, does it improve your production efficiency of the
Mhm.
bird over what they can do by themselves.
Mhm.
But also because, you can look at it from the stress. Okay, we have a lot of stressors now. And that's one of the things I'm doing. Like I said, I do a lot of research comparing production systems. And
Mhm.
so we see different stressors also affecting. And there's a bit of a change that is going on recently in terms of having more birds in a more humane manner, raising them in a more humane manner. And so you can see a lot of areas where you can have exogenous additives being of good benefit.
Mhm.
And in terms of the disadvantage, well, I would say, maybe the biggest one is the costs,
Mhm.
sometimes relative to the value that is given. Okay, so most producers would be like, oh, if I had this on my diet, for the birds, what are the advantages I get, and how does that relates to the costs, of that input? Another one is because regulatory restrictions. Again, when we talk about withdrawal and how it is, some residues, sometimes some people are concerned about residues in the meat or the egg.
Mhm.
And also in terms of the changing, landscape of poultry production, also in terms of the conventional versus the organic. Okay,
Mhm.
talk about consumer perception, and so these are some of the areas where there might be some pushback in the use of exogenous additives.
Right. It's interesting because it sounds like the advantages are all within the bird itself, and the disadvantages are kind of outside of the bird.
Right, right, right.
So, outside of the advantages and disadvantages, when producers are implementing or using these exogenous additives, what type of consideration should they take into mind when implementing these, whether it be in feed or in water delivery?
Okay, so that's a good question. Before I answer that question, I'll just talk briefly on what's brought this conversation up. So
Mhm.
I did a research with a producer, a pasture poultry producer, and so what we did was to have one group of birds given probiotics in water, another group of birds given probiotics in feed.
Mhm.
And so what we realized is that those that were given probiotics in water over the 6 to 7 day period performed better in terms of their growth, in terms of their gut health metrics, in terms of even the welfare. And so that started, giving me some ideas that, I've been doing all this, mostly with in feed, addition. And so one of the things that I was thinking about is in terms of the stability. Okay, so for feed, most times when you have in feed additives, you have to think about and worry about the stability. Most farmers or most producers have their feed stored over, you know, long period of time. And so after a while, probably, you have um, this stability dwindle over time. And so you have to think about that. Okay, do I want to keep it over time or do I want to give it to them immediately? And so these are some of the considerations that a farmer wants to look at. And also at the farm level, you also want to look at what is the immediate need. Okay, sometimes if you have it in the water, then you can easily give them that supplement and have a quick turnaround of the response, rather than have it in minute quantities in the diets over time. And so you have to look at labor also. Okay, if you are giving it in feed, that might be less labor intensive, but in water, and you have to change it every day. Those are some of the things that the farmer wants to think about. My suggestion actually would be to have both. Okay,
Mhm.
to have both in feed and in water, and that's one of the things I'm looking at right now, and see how we can better target these additives depending on factors such as the age of the animal, okay,
Mhm.
which is specific to the farm itself or the producer itself, depending on the physiological condition, the weather condition. Some of those factors play into what method you use.
Right. And it was just interesting that you mentioned the birds that had intake through water seemed to
Hmm.
do better than the ones
Hmm.
that took these additives through feed. Is there
Right.
is there any reasoning there? Is it maybe through just absorption, or is there any research behind it or thoughts behind that?
Well, my initial thought is just based on the stability,
Hmm.
okay, in terms of the fact that the in water was just diluted and given to the birds and then, immediately start working.
Right.
But in terms of the feed, there might be some interactions with some components in the feed also that is limiting the efficiency of the of the additive, or in this case, probiotics. Okay, and you have to realize also that most of these feed are processed. Okay, they're
Mhm. Right.
pelleted, and a lot of thermal processing, and so that might also affect the activity or the mode of action of those
Mhm.
additives. But in water, it's just going straight to the crop, going straight to
Right.
the gut, and then it works right away. So,
Right.
it has to be a juggle and see, But this is an ongoing research, and at least in my own research questions that I'm trying to find out which is the best method actually and that would depend on the breeds also.
Mhm.
Okay, the changing genetics of our fast growing broiler chickens
Mhm.
also will have something to play in this.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely an interesting area of research, and it sounds like there's a lot more to be expected from it as we continue to dive into this topic.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Great. Well, IODG, thank you so much for being on the show today. We appreciate your insight on this topic. Like I said, interesting research area and many more things to come from this. But before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to say or add before we head out?
Well, I mean, thank you for having me. And like I said, we have to start thinking or rethinking some of those things that we have been doing in terms of, at least from a nutritional perspective, it's one thing for us to add an additive, for an animal. It's another thing for it to be in the right, uh, you know, concentration or in the right mode that can actually give us that effect that we desire.
Mhm.
And so, just working with producers and some research that I've done, I've realized that sometimes we just forget about it in the feed, and then we see a lot of inconsistencies of response, and some of this might be due to the routes of delivery
Mhm.
uh, that are specific to some of those additives. So
Yeah.
thanks for having me, and I appreciate this talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate it and have a great one.
Thank you.